OPB Podcasts.
From the Gert Boyle studio, it's OPB Politics now for Thursday, August 13th. Practically all year, elected officials in Oregon have been trying to solve a puzzle. How can they ensure the enigmatic new owner of the Trailblazers doesn't attempt to take the team elsewhere, but not lose the public's metaphorical shirt in the process? We now have a basic idea of what that approach looks like. This week, after a fair amount of drama, the Portland City Council finalized the terms the city will seek in exchange for funding a renovation of the Moda Center. If all goes as planned, they'll join the state and Multnomah County in funding that roughly $600 million effort. But there are still so many questions. Today, we'll be chatting through what we know and what we don't about the bid to make sure the Portland Trailblazers remain the Portland Trailblazers. Welcome to the podcast. I'm OPB politics reporter Dirk Vanderhart.
And I'm OPB Portland City government reporter Alex Zielinski.
Alex, I was preparing for what I'm sure will be a very meaty discussion today. And in doing so, it struck me that there is just a lot. We have already covered quite a bit on politics now. We've talked extensively about how the legislature approved $365 million to renovate the Moda Center. We've also talked about some of the thorny politics in City Hall over this and major questions about what precisely all this public money for an improved Moda would actually pay for. But it's been almost 2 months since we checked in, and there's a lot that's new.
Yeah, I mean, 2 months is a long time in this particular universe,
yes.
Cursed universe. So let's see. For starters, none of those major questions that you mentioned have been answered. We still don't know what kind of renovations the Blazers want to see done at the Moda Center.
They won't say.
They have refused to share any detailed renovation plans until the city's funding commitment is locked in. Ironically, this has made it hard for the city to make that funding commitment because they need to know project details to know what kind of city fund they can use to pay for it. For example, does it include solar panels or other ways to cut back on greenhouse gas emissions? If so, then they could tap the climate fund. Or does it clearly spur economic development? Then it could use a city economic development fund. But without any details, they can't make that plan. And the Blazers haven't been jumping to share much of anything with the city. That's due to this kind of casual legal threat that I think we'll get into a bit later.
Yes.
Nevertheless, the Blazers aren't engaging the way the city wants them to. But it hasn't kept the city from advancing their work. In the past 2 months, City Council has hammered out the details of a term sheet, which essentially directs the city's long-term lease negotiations with the team. That was voted on yesterday. And the county, they've also agreed to their own funding package. Now all that's left is hashing out this lease agreement, which is not going to be easy.
No. And I mean, gosh, in following this, I was in Salem earlier this year, right? Covering this bill, this big debate over whether the state should be plunking all this state money toward the Moda Center. That felt like a pillow fight compared to some of the local brawling I witnessed over this deal. You have witnessed far more than I. I mean, I want to start with the county because that was actually the first time I think I got a sense of just how rancorous this might be. The county moved first on its funding piece before the city. Multnomah County officials have approved, I think, something like $100 million. It was not pretty.
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe you've been out of local politics for too long.
Probably.
Because the tenor of these conversations feel pretty standard for me, at least for the current state of local electeds. I mean, I didn't realize there was a chiller option. But you're right. I mean, it's spicy at both the county and the city. You know, elected officials have bristled at this idea that the state signed off on this big financial agreement in March and assumed that they would just kind of get in line behind them without question. And they've criticized state leaders repeatedly for not being more inquisitive with the Blazers about any of this when it was in their court. It just seemed like it kind of breezed through, and now plopped in front of the city and county to deal with. At Multnomah County, that frustration has been pointed a lot at Chair Jessica Vega Peterson, who was the one who pledged to the state that the county would hand over close to $100 million for Moda renovations. And like a lot of local governments, Multnomah County made big budget cuts this year, and commissioners were kind of insulted that they should prioritize fixing up a city building over patching up their own shortfalls. Here's how Commissioner Megan Moyer talked about it last week.
Because it is too much, and I don't want the county participating in subsidizing the maintenance of a building we don't own when we cannot afford to maintain the buildings we do.
You are making me realize, by the way, Alex, that I have maybe gone soft in covering Salem. Like Moyer particularly is one of the people that made me feel like this, because there was a hearing, I can't remember when at this point, when State Senator Kate Lieber, who's huge in terms of like what the state budget is going to pay for, Keith Wilson are sitting before her and the rest of the commission, and she is just going off on them, interrogating, like airing her grievances about the process, just like I was struck. It's just not, I guess it's not something that I'm used to seeing in Salem. So fair point. Maybe I'm just like out of the hardball. But one contention that Moyer and I think others made repeatedly in this county discussion is that, yeah, Portland, you got a reason to do this. State, sure, you might have a reason to do this. What is in it for us in Multnomah County? Like, why should we put the money up?
Yeah. I mean, it's a fair argument. Her argument is that the county doesn't own the building, unlike the city, so it doesn't get any property taxes from the deal, nor does it get any of the business license tax revenue the city is expecting through the sale of the Blazers earlier this year. One thing I'll say, though, is that the Moda Center is currently exempt from property taxes, so the city isn't getting anything there. But that's actually one of the major asks that the city and the county want to see out of the negotiation, something called a payment in lieu of taxes, asking the team to cover that lost tax revenue going forward. And the county could get a chunk of that, too. So we'll get into that a little bit more later. But yes, Moyer had concerns and stuck to them. And she was the only county commissioner who actually voted against the county's spending package last week.
Yeah, and the other part of that argument is, well, sure, the state can put this money up because actually what the state is doing here is taking income taxes from the Trailblazers and other folks and pouring it back into the Moda Center. So she's saying, like, this is just kind of circular funding. You're not taking away from other stuff.
Sure, the state's able to recoup their losses. Yeah. I mean, that's an argument the city has, too. They're like, we might not be able to get any money out of this either if we're pouring money into it.
And the answer back, I mean, it felt like was, yeah, sure, okay, you probably have a point there, but also, like, the civic loss to both the city and the county is going to be so great that you guys need to get on board. And, you know, despite the concern, as you said, like the funding passes, Moyer's against it, but this funding has been approved. And so that leaves one very, very big piece of the puzzle, which is the city of Portland. We will get into what that debate looked like after a quick break. And we are back. So we have talked to Alex about the county, some of the heartburn there. That leaves us with the city of Portland, which last month introduced its first draft of that term sheet you mentioned earlier, this framework for what the city wants their deal with the Blazers to look like. This document, I think it's fair to say, produced some controversy beginning almost immediately after it dropped, right?
Sure, yeah. It took a lot of counselors and me, to be honest, by surprise that the city administrator's office released this draft proposal what seemed like minutes after a 3-hour closed-door council meeting where counselors got into the nitty-gritty discussing their early thoughts about what a term sheet should include, but in no way were they deciding on, we should release this to the public. That call was made by the city administrator's office, who really wanted to get ahead of any complaints by the Blazers that the city wasn't being transparent and negotiating in good faith. But it did piss a lot of counselors off, and it didn't keep the Blazers from complaining. Days after it came out, Blazers insiders told national sports reporters that it was a non-starter for the team. So it really felt like no one was happy about it from the start.
Yeah, they were saying, like, this is just going to make us go harder. If they want to put this out, guess what? They have a worse deal coming.
Yeah. Which would have happened regardless of when it dropped. But I don't know if it did what the city wanted it to do.
I had the honor, as you know, of returning to my old haunts in Portland City Hall for the first time in years and years, probably like 8 years since I stepped in that building, because you, Alex, took some time off to celebrate your wedding. Congratulations.
Thank you. I will say the biggest gift was to not think about this whole mess for an entire week. But I know I missed some fireworks.
You did. And as a guest at your wonderful ceremony, I can confirm that the vibes there were far, far better than they were in City Hall, particularly on the day that executives with the Trailblazers actually dropped by to offer some thoughts on the terms the city was considering. I felt like, and again, like, we know that I'm out of touch and I don't really understand the the vibe of city politics, but
that's not fair.
But it felt to me like a pretty remarkable hearing where on one hand, the Blazers are saying, they can't abide by this term sheet and the terms the city wants to introduce. On the other hand, saying they're not going to offer any specifics about why they're objecting. They'll maybe suggest things they think are objectionable, but they're just not going to get into it. They just are telling the city that this is a non-starter, as you said. They also seem to suggest repeatedly that they weren't just asking the city to fund the Moda Center, that their demands might be bigger. Here is a clip of Dwayne Hankins, the president of business operations for the Blazers.
Portland's current stagnant business climate, high income taxes, and divisive political environment make this a tough city to invest in. It makes it harder to sell tickets, secure corporate partnerships, and as I said, recruit players. And that's not just our assessment. Read the headlines.
I mean, this is like, it was an echo of things we've heard Tom Dundon suggest in public. This notion that, hey, this city kind of sucks. Like, why would we want to be here?
Why did I buy a team here?
Exactly. I mean, it did not look like a particularly comfortable place for Dwayne Hankins to be in, but here we are. He has a boss. And like he's saying, there's just this suggestion that the Blazers could be looking for way more than money for potentially tax changes, like which the city doesn't control. One other major sticking point, though, that Hankins and others with the Blazers raised again and again was something you reported on, which was this kind of wonky question about whether or not the Moda Center is a so-called first-class arena or is in first-class condition. Why does this matter? And why has it become such a huge thing looming over these negotiations?
Right. So the current short-term lease agreement between the city and the Blazers requires that the city maintain the Moda Center as, like you said, a first-class NBA arena. Of course, there's no definition to that, of what that means. But this came up in June when Councilor Steve Novick essentially asked at City Council, are the Blazers meeting that standard? And if not, can we sue them? This rattled the Blazers, as you can imagine. They said that's why they've been slow to share any information about renovations with the city on the chance that those documents could be used in court, maybe against them. To be clear, the city has no plans to sue the Blazers, at least right now. And according to the city, they could only take legal action about this specific term. And if it's not up to first-class standards, they could only take that action after this existing lease expires in 2030, which by then, ideally, a new lease will hopefully be in place, a longer-term lease.
Right.
Nonetheless, the Blazers have kept asking the city to remove that first-class phrase from the existing lease, and the city won't budge. I do think they see it as a form of leverage against the Blazers at this point, which they don't have many of those.
Yeah, some people have pointed out, like, if this goes away, it just makes it all the more easy and painless if Tom Dundon does want to make a move. Like, there's one less thing that's going to force him to pay big money as he heads out the door. But like you said, this was never up for debate. I mean, Mayor Keith Wilson and Council President Dunphy said, we are not looking backwards. We're looking forward. We're not touching this bridge agreement. There was a big debate, though, on what the city should ask for in return for all this money it's potentially putting up, this term sheet, right? This final term sheet. And yesterday, the city council wound up approving a plan, 8-4, which I will say is maybe a little more, more of a pro vote than I was expecting from some of the debates. So let's start with some of the highlights. What are the terms the city has settled on, at least as a starting point for negotiations?
Sure, yeah, with the asterisk that this is just the very beginning. This isn't the final deal. So the city's term sheet commits $120 million city dollars up front and up to $275 million of ongoing maintenance over the 20-year lease. This is significant because up until now, Mayor Keith Wilson was really the only person in City Hall promising this money, with the council kind of like, what? Who agreed to this? We didn't really sign on to this. And so now they're officially saying, yes, we agree. We will sign up, hand over this money eventually. So there's that. But councilors, like you said, they want some things in exchange for that money. The top line is that they want a commitment from the Blazers to remain in Portland for the duration of the lease. They also want the team to pay $3 million annually to recoup the property taxes that are not being paid in the building, the thing I mentioned earlier. And they want to see roughly $3 million in rent paid to the city by the Blazers each year. So, combined over $6 million annually from the Blazers. And then some non-monetary stuff like a commitment that the team allows Moda staff to unionize, a promise that negotiators won't commit specific city funds without knowing first where it's coming from through negotiations, some more vague pledges to allow community groups to use the space and keep costs down for low-income visitors. It's a lot of kind of like, these would be nice to haves if we can negotiate them.
Yes.
Not a ton of like hard-line things aside from kind of the money pieces.
Well, and the money pieces are the things that I think the Blazers have suggested most strenuously. Yeah. They don't want to, they're not going to let the city increase their costs of $6 million a year. I mean, we'll see. It could be posturing, but the councilors, are conflicted on, and if these demands are going far enough, the Blazers will say they're way too far.
Sure.
Council's wondering whether they're far enough, right? What are some of the criticisms we heard of this term sheet yesterday?
Yeah, so the 4 councilors who voted against this plan, they did so for all largely the same reason. They want to see a better return on investment for the city. One example, Councilor Candace Avalos pushed for more private financing and more oversight in the term sheet and a few amendments that didn't pass. She said that, any money the city gives to Moda, it's essentially taking away from other things the city should be spending money on, especially amid an ongoing budget crisis. Here she is.
And every dollar that we commit here is a dollar that's not going to be available for parks and housing and public safety and climate investments and filling future budget deficits. Remember, we just closed a $170 million budget deficit, and we know that our fiscal challenges are not going away. So this is about whether this investment is worth what Portland is being asked to give up to make it. And so for me, I still needed to see more.
So that's pretty much in line with how her other colleagues who voted it down kind of spoke about it. It just wasn't the right trade-off. They weren't convinced that it was a good starting place for negotiations if they were giving up that much.
Right. Very fair. There's opportunity cost. If we're dumping a bunch of money we could be spending elsewhere. What were the folks who wound up supporting this term sheet saying?
Sure. So they also talked about the city budget, but their argument is that any investment in the arena will only boost city revenue. That's because, a thriving, bustling Moda Center might boost property taxes, business taxes, all things that go back into the city's general fund. And tourism taxes. Here's how Councilor Loretta Smith put it.
And the economic impact of the Moda Center cannot be overstated. As a premier destination for sports, concerts, and events, it draws millions of visitors to our city each year. These visitors support our local hotels, restaurants, small businesses, particularly in the central city and the Lloyd Center district.
So there's this hope and dream that a thriving Moda Center means a thriving Portland. And while the Blazers aren't the only Moda tenant, councilors painted a real gloomy picture of a city without the Blazers, which we haven't really gotten into much, that this is this big looming threat here, that if the city doesn't pony up money and strike an agreeable deal with the Blazers, that their new owner, Tom Dundon, will move them to a different city. I'll note that while folks disagreed on the final term sheet vote yesterday, they all agreed that Dundon is the villain here.
Yes.
That his lack of engagement with the city and apathy to Portland as a whole has hurt. Here's how Councilor Alana Pertolgini put it yesterday. She kind of was speaking to him directly.
If you, Tom, continue to come to the table with nothing more than proposals which try to bleed Portland dry and which frankly leave me wondering if you even knew this team was located in Portland when you bid on it, we're not going to be able to get to a deal. We want a reasonable deal in Portland. We are scrappy and practical and ready to make it work, but we also will not be taken advantage of.
And so, she was one of the councilors who voted in favor of this term sheet, but with, a caveat that we need the Blazers to be an active participant in this conversation, specifically ownership.
One of the things we haven't talked about either is there was a whole public hearing on the term sheet, and it was very much the same dynamic. I have to say, there were Portlanders that really were do whatever you can to keep the Blazers. We need the Blazers. And there was people let the Blazers leave. This is not worth the money. To a person, I think, they felt like Tom Dundon is the villain here. He has just really, tanked any chance that he will be appreciated in this city. Maybe that changes, but for now, it is not looking great for his public perception. When we last talked about this whole Moda issue on the podcast in June, Alex, I think you suggested that this wasn't purely breaking along the council's normal lines. Progressive members on one side, moderates on the other. That's typically the split we see. But there were a lot of concerns about prudent use of public money. Did that hold true? I mean, did council find new coalitions here, or did it wind up sort of going along the fault we're used to?
Yeah, I can say I was right. My guess in June, apparently I was reading the tea leaves correctly, because this vote really broke from that tired 6-6 split we've grown accustomed to on city council. There were two councils specifically who voted for the term sheet that surprised me. One was actually Councilor Steve Novick, who has been resistant to approving any plan that doesn't lead to the city recouping its lost revenue. But he was able to adjust the term sheet with an amendment to include this annual ask for rent payments that could make up that gap. And so he, signed up for it. He actually texted me after the meeting yesterday saying, like, whoa, that was wild. I came in not thinking that I was going to vote for any of this, and then I got exactly what I wanted. And then there's Councilor Samir Kanal, and he's the only Democratic Socialist on City Council who didn't vote down the term sheet. He also represents the district where the Moda Center sits, and he said that he worried negotiations would just stall indefinitely if the plan was voted down yesterday, that there wouldn't be another chance to take it up. But he also said, he was going to need more convincing before voting on the final deal. So while perhaps the four most progressive councilors on City Hall did vote in lockstep, this vote did show some nuance in where their common allies vote.
One of the things I've been kind of wrestling with here is there's been so much obsession, I guess, with the term sheet and whether council was going to get this far and what the county would do. And we've made it this far. I'm not even sure what it actually means, right? Like, okay, here's a starting point, what the city would like in a perfect world to get from a deal. There is just, am I wrong? Like, it feels like there's no guarantee of success. We have no idea what a deal actually looks like when we strike one by the end of the year. I mean, a couple big questions, right? One, where is the city going to get the $120 million upfront money for the Moda Center? I think you said that there's still a lot of details that need to be hammered out.
I mean, I will make this quick. I have absolutely no idea. We know that the mayor wants to put maybe estimated kind of $50 million tax revenue from the sale of the Blazers towards it. And that feels more guaranteed than kind of anything. But the other options, using the city's climate fund or economic development money, that's a big question mark without more information from the Blazers. And it's not really clear when we'll get the information or when this, when that will be decided on. I mean, some folks have told me this might not even come up until next year's budget talks, because we might sign off on this deal and say, okay, we'll figure out the money later, which I think a lot of councilors would not be, and the public would not be pleased with. But it's cart before horse. There's also some talk about taking out bonds. But then again, how will the city pay those back? It takes us back to the same question. So we'll have to kind of wait and see. Yeah,
and it's really the 120 that's the question, right? Because if I understand it right, there is, over the course of 20 years, the city has said it will spend 275. And they know where that money's coming from. But where the 120 million lump sum comes from is the question. So the second big question I have, probably another one that's hard to answer, is, do we know the Blazers are going to come to the table for meaningful negotiations and engagement? I mean, do city officials seem confident at this point this is going to go well?
We don't know, and they don't seem confident. Basically, all we know about the Blazers is that they want to see major renovations and that they don't want to pay for any of it. They have made that clear, as we heard from Dwayne Hankins earlier. Whether they'll move past this issue with the legal threat too and start engaging with the city is a big question mark, because it seems like it's a non-starter for them to even get to the table until that first-class phrasing's removed, and the city's not going to remove that. So that could impact the pace of negotiations. This could go poorly. But there's always one guy on city council who finds a silver lining to what feels like a slightly doomed situation. That's our reluctant council president, Jamie Dunphy. I'll let him have the last word here.
I am certain that our greatest chapter is ahead of us, and I hope that the Blazers are a part of that future. If they choose not to be, I have no question that our incredible city will still bloom, thrive, and make great places for cool stuff to happen.
So I'll leave it with that.
Okay. Well, we will, I'm sure, be on the edge of our seats, munching on our $15 Moda Center popcorn as this shakes out. Alex, thanks as always for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, a delight.
This week's episode of OPB Politics Now was recorded in the Gert Boyle studio. It was produced by Andrew Thien, and our audio engineer is Layla Isbell. Our music comes from Audio Network. We'll be back next week with more political news from across the Pacific Northwest. Until then, you can find all of OPB's reporting, as always, at opb.org. Thanks for your support, and thanks for listening.